Greetings, everyone. It's Crime Talk with Crin, and we are back with episode 29. I have some notes here, and I tried to organize them, and I just got so just worked up. It's still all over the place, but we're going to get through it as best as we can. Before I start, I want to say welcome to all my new subscribers. If this is your first time over here on my channel, subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave me a comment, let me know what you think. I absolutely enjoy chatting with you guys in the comment section. A huge shout out to and welcome back to all my day ones. Thank you guys for toughing it out with me and still being here. It is greatly appreciated. So I'm not going to keep you too long. I'm going to get right to it. I know you saw the title of the video and you're like, what is Crin talking about? So I'm going to, like I said, try to get through this as best I can. All right, let's get to it. For those of you who have been hanging out here with me for a while, you know that when it came out that there was unknown male DNAs, I like to flip my wig. I was so shocked. I'm like, how can this be? This doesn't even make sense. There's no way. There's no way. How can there be unknown male DNA if they literally jumped through hoops? They have bent rules, maybe even broken some, to identify Brian Kohberger. If there were other male DNA samples at the scene, why wouldn't they jump through those same hoops to identify these people? It didn't make sense to me. And so I had received a lot of comments from people saying that, maybe they weren't, maybe they were in the house, but they weren't relevant. And I'm like, I wasn't buying it. And there's a lot of things that come out in this case that people quickly, dismiss. It's just online rumor, it's speculation, there's no proof. And I'm like, well, the trial hasn't happened yet, so no, we don't have the proof of everything. But now that we have these hearings happening, we're finding out that some of the things that we heard in the beginning that were brushed off as untrue and rumors and speculation, we're finding out that those things were true. But before I get all into that, I have a clip for you.
Correct.
Any response? All right. So if I'm understanding your question there, or your assertion that we're talking about three potential analysis of DNA that was not provided to you, but that has no connection to Mr. Kohberger.
Correct.
Any response?
Your Honor, we didn't realize this was going to be an issue today. We have given the defense everything that we received from the lab. They've asked for DNA workups on other people. To the extent that they don't have them, they weren't done. We can't produce something that doesn't exist. We've provided everything. There's one outstanding lab report that relates to the forensic examination by the lab personnel of the crime scene itself. We'll be receiving today. That's the only outstanding lab report. Everything else, along with all the notes, is what there is, and it's been provided to the defense. And if they're hoping that there's something else there, it's not there.
So if you've been following this case, you should remember when this happened. You should remember how this was probably like the plot twist of all plot twists. And not surprising, the mainstream media didn't pick up and run with it. It kind of got swept under the rug by a lot of the creators who believe that Bryan Kohberger is guilty, period. So, I am less and less convinced after I thought through what I wanted to present in this video. I was even less convinced than ever that he did this. I used to think that maybe he had something to do with it. I'm like, they didn't just pull his name out of the hat. Who is this guy? Like, nobody knows who he is. How did they just pull his name out of the hat? But now, I'm not here to change your mind. I'm not here to try to convince anybody of anything. I need that to be abundantly clear. I'm not here to change your mind. You are all entitled to your own thoughts and opinions, whether they're based on fact, fiction, proof, or not. It doesn't matter. You think what you want to think. I'm not trying to change that. I'm just here to tell you guys what I've been thinking. What makes sense to me. That's it. But could you imagine if this happened in Judge Hippler's courtroom? The way Judge Hippler fires questions off at both sides, could you imagine how this would have went down in his court? Now, I don't have the full clip, but the part that really pissed me off was that when the prosecution was responding, they were trying to act like there was some kind of conspiracy. I want to say that a couple minutes before this clip, he actually said conspiracy. And that irritated the fool out of me. It irritates me even more today for the simple fact that we know what the DNA samples are that they were asking for. So at this point, clearly, Bryan Kohberger has been arrested. Clearly, they have already done whatever IgG weirdness. They know. And now they know that the defense knows that there were unknown male DNAs on the scene. And they did not go to the same lengths to identify them as they did to identify Bryan Kohberger. It's janky at best. So then, when you factor in, because I've watched trillions of videos at this point, and everybody who was questioning the touch DNA said, not only is it touch DNA, not only is it traced barely their DNA, it's on a movable object. Add to that a small movable object. This is crap. And that's why when Ann Taylor said, when you have one thing that's the same as the other thing, maybe the one thing isn't that important. And everybody said, oh, she's throwing stuff at the wall to see if it sticks. No, you have a accessory. That's like finding a phone case. And so you're like, oh, I know that this goes to a phone. And then you just assume that that's somebody else's phone case. You don't know whose case it is or how it got there. Because I find a phone case in my house does not mean it's my phone case. Just because you were at my house today does not mean it's your phone case. This is an accessory to a knife that they found. Nobody knows how it got there. The crime scene was not secured. Couldn't be secured because the police were not called for 8+ hours. There were people summoned to the scene well before the police. They don't even know how many kids were there. Cleared them all, though, but they say they don't know how many it was. You don't know how that thing got there. And then add into the fact that the person who allegedly located the knife sheath didn't show up until 4 hours after that. But we're going to get into that in a minute. So now you have the prosecution standing here acting like the defense is grasping at straws when everybody in attendance at this point knows that the touch DNA is on an accessory, but you have blood DNA on a handrail at the crime scene. You have blood on a glove right outside of the house. Blood. Why wasn't it more important to find out whose blood this is? That doesn't make sense. And then they're saying that Judge Hippler keeps going on, and I understand his point that you're arguing about whether or not there is probable cause. They found his DNA on the accessory to a knife at a crime scene when people were killed by a knife. Now, probable cause. I get that point. I do get that. And that's why in my previous video, I was saying that I didn't think that Ann Taylor was arguing the necessary points. She's on the right track, but I think that she's focusing too much on the wrong thing. Where in the last video I was discussing how, she was going so hard about, how did they say it? Expectation of privacy. When I think the bigger matter was the fact that the DNA sample doubled or more than doubled in size from Osram to the FBI. I think that that's a more important case to argue. But we're here to argue probable cause, which I didn't think was necessary. They argued for a ridiculous amount of time with Judge about the IgG information. I now understand why that was important, but at that time, it just seemed like it was ridiculous. I'm like, well, they keep saying that they're not using it. They keep saying that they're filing a motion to limine. Where's the motion to limine? Why are we still talking about this if you're not going to use it? And then people are saying that the IgG and the profile and all that was just for a tip, just a lead. And I think I said it in my last video as well, that the FBI was like, okay, here's a tip, Brian Kohberger, make it happen. Like, we're not going to give you anything. Just know this is who did it. And I think that the state and local police were left to make fetch happen, basically. They had to figure out a way to prove the case that the FBI, set up for them with no proof. All right, so take a look at this clip and let's see if we can tie a few things together.
You have surviving witnesses to an incident at 3 or 4 in the morning, and the 911 call didn't come until noon.
I don't think I ever said that they were witnesses. I said they were there.
This was in the very beginning. I want to say this was like November the 16th. The press was having a field day trying to figure out what was the deal with the remaining roommates. Excuse me. And from the very beginning, they said, I didn't say that they're witnesses. I said that they were there. So this is not outright saying that they're not witnesses, but this is alluding to the fact that they are not witnesses. You know, in the beginning, they tried to act like everybody was asleep. It wasn't until the probable cause affidavit came out that you found out that the whole house was up. But here we are, very beginning, day 3, I believe, and they already said that the remaining witnesses were not suspects and they were not witnesses. They have always definitively said that the roommates were not involved. They posted it on their Twitter page. They posted it on the website. It's been plastered all over the news that the roommates were not involved. Fry says, I didn't say they were witnesses. I just said that they were there. Well, what is a witness? If Dylan says that the suspect walked past her when she opened her bedroom door to see what was going on for a third time. She says she opened her door and he walked past her. She didn't say she peeked out, saw somebody shut the door. No, she said that he walked past her and she stood there long enough to see where he went after he passed her. She stood there long enough to give some goofy description of bushy eyebrows and a face mask. Now we know, finally, that the rumor and speculation of Bethany seeing somebody taking their clothes off or a naked man outside of her window, that was actually true. She actually said that. So if she sees somebody taking their clothes off or their overclothes, whatever, protective layer, if she sees them taking anything that could have blood on it off and shoving it in a bag, did they keep their possibly blood-soaked mask on? Or did they take that off too? So now, I want to know, because we already know that Dylan was not able to positively ID him. So what did Bethany say when they showed Bethany a picture of Brian Kohberger? So again, I ask, how are the remaining roommates not witnesses? They were awake. They knew what was going on, as described in the text messages that they were sending back and forth. And they both told the police that they saw a person. They heard things. They saw things. Whether they recanted later is besides the point. We'll get into that at another time. But the point is, they heard things. They saw things. They were awake. They were talking about it. And they were present. How aren't they witnesses? But I want to get into one more thing before I tie this all together, and it's another missed opportunity on the part of Ann Taylor. And I know that she's been doing this a very long time, so I don't want to say that she's nervous or unsure. Maybe, maybe Judge Hippler intimidates her, or maybe this is just her, damsel in distress tactic that she uses. I don't know. But, when she was talking about the knife sheath, and she kept saying, we don't know how it got there. We don't know how it got there. And so Judge Hippler is like, bro, you have a great argument. The only thing is his DNA is on the knife sheath. And she's like, We don't know how it got there. And so the thing is, we don't know how the DNA got on the knife sheath. We don't know how the knife sheath got to the crime scene, right? And so I also want to say Judge Hippler has been letting the state know very clearly that they have a battle ahead of them. He said numerous times, this matters for a conviction, this matters for a trial, this doesn't matter for probable cause. So he's basically letting the state know, this is an issue. What is being presented to me today has Swiss cheese holes. This is bad for y'all. This is bad. And he said it several times, for the trial, this is going to be wild. But for a probable cause, no. And that's why I keep saying, I feel like she was arguing the wrong points. Now, the knife sheath, like I said earlier, the knife sheath is an accessory. The knife sheath is a movable object, as so many people have said. But we also know that there are discrepancies when it comes to the knife sheath. We have Payne saying that he saw the knife sheath. We have Blaker saying that he was informed by ISP later that a knife sheath had been found. And then we have Dawn Daniels saying, hey, I don't want to have nothing to do with what you're about to find out. So what is the deal? What is the deal? Why did Dawn Daniels include a supplemental disclosure saying if at some point the DNA is inadmissible, pretend we never talked about it? Why would she have to say that? This is the warrants leading up to. No, there was no trials. There was no, Brian Koberger wasn't even extradited back to Idaho yet. And Dawn Daniels was already like, whoo. I said it in a previous video. Payne was like, I'm standing on business. I found it. Now what? And Blaker and Dawn Daniels wanted nothing to do with it. This is the knife sheath. Because the knife sheath has the DNA on it. Allegedly. We heard in the very beginning that they sent the chief to the lab. They didn't find anything. It got sent to another lab and miracles happened. We were told at the hearing that from Othram to the FBI, the DNA sample more than doubled in size. The size that it was originally did not lead to anyone. There's talk about, it being degraded because of the material that it was on, the button snap and brass and rah. There's all that. There's, just trace DNA. It was a very small amount. And so, they apparently worked miracles to produce more DNA than they were given. And that's not speculation. That's not shade. That's what happened. They were given a piece of DNA and they made more DNA. That's the only way you end up with a bigger sample is if you make more DNA. How do you make more DNA? This is all shady. When you get into that, they went into genealogy sites that they said that they wouldn't. And then the state's trying to argue, well, it doesn't matter. He's Brian Koberger. He doesn't have a say. He can't do it. And that's how they were acting. They were acting as if it was laughable to say that someone who has not been convicted of anything could have a question about something. Judge Hippler asked Ann Taylor if it was Brian Kohberger's DNA on the website, and she did not say yes or no. That's the point that she should be arguing. What is the deal? The state knew from day one that this DNA knife sheath IgG business was going to be a problem. They said from day 2 that they weren't going to use it. Why are we 2 years and change down the road and we're still talking about it? Because you have not filed a motion of limine saying that you're not going to use it. Why not? Everybody's saying that the defense is throwing anything at the wall to see what's going to stick. Well, what are y'all doing? What are y'all doing, prosecution team, when you guys are putting out information that you know is false? What are y'all doing? You're saying that the defense is grasping at straws. They're trying to maneuver the fake news that you guys are producing and distributing. We remember in the beginning when Brian Kohberger first got back to Idaho, everything was moving forward, and we were trying to, I don't even think we were at the point of waiving the right to speedy trial. Things were moving forward. And then the defense team calls Bethany to testify at the preliminary hearing on behalf of Brian Kohberger, because it was said from the very beginning that Bethany Funk had exculpatory evidence. Soon, Bethany Funk was called to testify for the defense. We end up with a ham sandwich. We end up with a grand jury indictment. And then here we are. 2 years later, nothing. Oh, but now there's something. There's very much something. As Ann Taylor said, we have one thing that's the same as another thing that makes the one thing not so important. Because when you tie this all together, when you tie together the unknown male DNAs, one particular unknown male D, blood on a glove outside of the residence, you tie in Bethany Funk, who told the police that she saw a man outside of her window taking his clothes off, putting them in a bag. Wouldn't you think that the person that was outside her window taking their clothes off, putting them in a bag, would have dropped a glove that had blood on it? So the person that was outside of her room taking their clothes off, putting them in a bag, dropped a glove on the ground that had their blood DNA on there. And they decided not to do anything with it. How? And this is the point that Ann Taylor should argue. Instead of trying to be Dr. Seuss in a courtroom, hello, Bethany said she saw somebody outside taking their clothes off, putting them in a bag, taking off protective clothing and gloves, putting them in a bag, and you find a glove outside where she says they were taking their clothes and gloves off, put them in a bag. That glove has blood on it from an unknown male. Why wouldn't y'all go over the river and through the woods to find out who that is? If somebody after the crime is outside taking clothes off, putting them in a bag so they don't track blood and DNA somewhere else, they're in a rush, it makes sense that they would drop a glove. So that's the exculpatory evidence. That is what they have been trying to get Bethany to say out loud since the very beginning. Because the PCA came out and it was all Dylan. And we were trying to figure out, what did Bethany say that her stuff wasn't in the PCA? This is what she said, that she saw somebody out of her window taking their clothes off. So you're trying to tell me. Now, Brian Kohlberger is supposedly a ninja. He supposedly got in and out and skirt down the street by 4:20. Well, what time did Bethany see somebody taking their clothes off outside? If she saw somebody taking their clothes off outside, clothes and gloves outside, why do we not think that that's their glove? There's blood on it that tells you exactly who it is. Why don't we care about that?
Evidence, when there are other things in the affidavit that were affidavits at that point that could explain that, including the use of covering clothing and covering gloves and all that could be put into a bag real quick on the way out, that was in one of the affidavits. I guess, and I don't intend to argue with you about it.
That's it right there. That's it right there. You want to talk about Frank's motions and Frank's hearings? You want to talk about information that was intentionally withheld? That part. The fact that there is a testimony from one of the remaining roommates that says that she saw a man outside of her window taking clothes off, putting them in a bag. The fact that a glove was found outside of the residence with blood on it. That blood was determined to be male, but they were not able to determine who it belonged to, which means it wasn't Ethan's blood. If that information was given to the magistrate, would it have made a difference? When you factor in, we don't know how the knife sheath got there because there were kids at the house after the murder, but before the police were called. When we factor in that the police showed up 4 hours, well, the lead detective, the person who allegedly discovered the knife sheath, showed up 4 hours after the police were called. So this is now at the least 12 hours since the murders occurred. When you factor in the DNA sample more than doubling in size from the time that it was retrieved to the time the FBI got finished with it, yeah, this all looks like shady business. And the question is, if Brian Kohlberger did this open and shut without a question, why do they need to do all this? Why do they need to hide all this? Why all this cloak and dagger weirdness? Why can't you just let it be what it is and let the evidence speak for itself? Because there is none. That's why. Leave me a comment below. Let me know what you think. If, like I said, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. That's all I got.